We are in part 4 talking about early Christianity. Now remember, I will keep this under 5 minutes and you can push the little ×2 thing to get through it faster if you'd like. Now, one of the things we have to understand about gender in the ancient world is that in the Roman context, women were not seen as a different version of the same species. Men were seen as perfection, as a creation that was wonderful, and women were seen as a deformed other. They were at best property. They were otherwise functional for use and for being property, but were not seen as being intellectually, physically, or otherwise spiritually as perfect as men. And so in many of the writings you will find a concept of women being made men. Like in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, there is an idea that Jesus will make Mary Magdalene a man. And why would he do so? Not because he's homosexual, but because of the fact that he fundamentally has to make her a man for them to value her as an equal. And so he has to say through his glory, he will make her a man, and then she can have these kinds of knowledge. Because for them, him providing favor to a woman is unthinkable, because they view women as fundamentally something different. And that viewing of women as non-human has continued legally all the way up to the modern era. So please look into that if you're not familiar. The baseline is, though, that women in early Christianity very often had opportunities that otherwise would not be there for them. And even from a modern lens, we might think that these things are restrictive, but for them, those opportunities of being made male actually were fundamentally liberative for them in the time, because their other options were to be married and bear children endlessly and keep a home endlessly until they died, right? And so this is something that for a lot of women, being able to step into a different role and being made male through the churches, through these ascetic groups, through these various Gnostic groups, they fundamentally were able to do more in their lives than they ever would have otherwise. And so what we often see in the modern context as restrictive, such as going into a nunnery or going into an ascetic group, for them fundamentally allowed them to step out of their confined roles of only having the option to be mothers. They could go and study spirituality. They could go with this group. And even Paul preached this in the idea of saying that you are neither male nor female, right, through Christ Jesus. And that is the baseline. But Paul's words were even mutated over time into a more Romanized model. His words were edited and other letters were written in his name. Now, forgeries happened like that, again, through the orthodoxy, but we also have to remember that some of the forgeries were caught in their time, or maybe not necessarily forgeries as much as fiction that was very much demonized by the church. And one of these is the Acts of Paul and Thecla. The Acts of Paul and Thecla is a story. It's written like a novel of the time. And instead of being a romance novel with the trope of the lovely couple coming together, this is a sort of anti-romance novel in which we have Thecla, who is promised to be married, and she does not wish to. And she hears Paul preach and becomes enraptured with him. And she goes to him in the prison and begins to listen to him and spends the night with him, not really in any kind of sexual way, just listens to him the whole night, right? He is celibate, she's listening to him. But because she spent the night with him now, her purity is completely in question, and it's a whole thing. And the story goes on that she is going to leave her family and go travel with Paul, and Paul's kind of a dick to her, and he lets her get pretty much almost SA'd by somebody who is an official, and she gets thrown to a trial of being attacked by lionesses and man-eating seals, and it is her whole adventure and the miracles she performs in order to say that she is truly called by God, and she baptizes herself, and she is like saved from these wild animals, and then she goes and teaches. She baptizes herself and teaches, right? And then Paul pretty much just isn't even the main character, she is. And it's this whole thing about her, and they hated it. They hated it because it fundamentally said that women could baptize themselves, that they had all of this power, and they were like, no, this is heresy, this is bad. But there were entire cults for many, many years dedicated to Thecla because she was such a compelling main character.